What is the story behind the logo that you use in your intros? Where did it come from? That logo is called The Meaning of Music, and it's actually a sculpture that I made in 1985 that's about 5.5 feet by 5.5 feet and about 8 inches thick, and it's made out of foam core, which is this. It's a material that's often used as a backing for paintings or for when you get them framed. It's styrofoam sheet about 1/4 inch thick with paper on both sides, and you can cut it very accurately with an X-Acto knife. And so what I did was make a stack of those foam core sheets about 8 inches high, and I made the thing in quarters, and so that it would fit together on the wall because it would have been too big to maneuver easily. And it's a very complicated image. It's actually a three-dimensional representation of a two-dimensional representation of a four-dimensional object. And that four-dimensional object you could think of as, it's a representation of time and space. And I can tell you, I kind of have to hint at what the painting means, or the sculpture. It means the same thing that music means. You know how music unfolds and then something else unfolds within it, and then it unfolds again within it, like a rose opening into the day. Or like a lotus flower that sort of comes up from the darkest depths up through the dark water and then blooms on the surface of the water in the sun, and that's where the Buddha, what would you say, symbolically rests. So you can imagine that thing opening, and then imagine that that's what that painting is an image of, and that's the same thing as music. So it's a mandala image, and for Jung, the mandala was a symbol of the self, and the self was something that unfolds like music, which is actually why we like music. And it's like the rose that you see, the geometric rose that you see in stained glass. It's the same thing. That's the stained glass window that Pinocchio's reprehensible compatriot, what's his name, Lampwick, breaks when he's in Pleasure Island, and he throws a rock to destroy the model home and to demolish the substructure of Western civilization. And so I had a very intense religious experience at one point when I was contemplating that. So when I drew the image to begin with, I drew it in about 10 minutes, kind of rough, and then I used a straight edge to straighten it all out, and a protractor or a compass to make the curves. But I drew it very quickly, and I'd been reading Jung a lot at that point, like for months of intense reading, and that image sort of popped out of me very suddenly. But it took about 3 months to make the actual image, and then I had only 1/4 of it hanging on my wall because it was so big. And I had finished it after about 3 months of work. So this was back in 1985 when I was a graduate student. And I was listening to the Jupiter Symphony, which is the piece of music that I use, that was used for the intro to my videos. And it's a Mozart symphony. And this happened, man. So this happened. So I was really watching that mandala, that quarter mandala that I had made intensely. And listening to the music, trying to understand what the music was signifying, because music has intrinsic meaning, which is a very strange thing. Now, part of the reason for that is that language has meaning, and our language has a musical quality, right? And that's processed mostly by the right hemisphere, so that when people speak, there's a melody in their language, and that carries a lot of the emotional import. And then what musicians have done is figured out how to use that musical faculty, let's call it, that non-semantic musical faculty, to sort of purely denote meaning. That's part of what music means. And so, but I was still trying to understand what the meaning was, because it's non-verbal, the meaning of music, and I was trying to figure out how to articulate that, and that's partly why I made the sculpture, was to get a grip on it and to understand it. And anyways, I was really, really concentrating hard on that mandala and that sculpture, and I had been working on it intensely for about 3 months, so that's a lot of meditation on a single idea. And I was standing in my living room, and then I had this very strange experience. I can't explain this properly because there's no way of really describing it, but I'll do my best. So, in those Renaissance paintings, sometimes you see, well, first of all, you see great cloud, great sunny skies with massive, stupendous, impressive billows of clouds, and then light shining through, the sunlight shining through in streams. Sometimes that's captured very beautifully by especially English later later artists usually that are later than the Renaissance, but you see it in Renaissance paintings too. And you also see in Renaissance paintings, especially in the earlier phase of the Renaissance, the sky opening up and God sort of peering forth through the clouds. And that's exactly what seemed to happen to me, is that I had this sense. It was like a vision, although I was still in my living room and knew it, but inside the theater of my imagination, I could feel the sky opening up. Now, it wasn't the sky. It was, I would say, the only way I can really think about it is that it was something like another dimension. And then I could feel this force descend upon me, which I think was something that, would have been considered classically something like the Holy Ghost, I suppose. And it filled me with this intense sense of paradisal, I don't know how to say it. Well, it was like being in heaven for some brief period of time, and I could feel myself transformed, transmuted as a consequence of this experience, and it was as if I was in the presence of something that was living, and I suppose that was an experience of God, if you want to put it that way. That's certainly what it seemed like, and I felt that I could live that way. I could live transfigured like that permanently if I desired it. And I thought, my God, I wouldn't be able to walk down the street in this sort of elevated state, let's say. I don't know how I would act. I don't know how I would interact with people. I don't know how people would interact with me. I just don't think that I could do it. And then I felt that whatever had descended, it seemed that as if it was sorrowful, and it departed from me slowly, and with no punitive intent, and I wouldn't say with any dissatisfaction. It was as if a gift had been offered that I wasn't in no position to receive. And I talked to my wife soon afterwards. I shook physically for about half an hour after that experience, like I was shaking, like you shake after a car accident, if you've ever been in a car accident. And my pupils were completely dilated, and I had a couple of experiences like that, like echoes of it a couple of times after that. And so anyways, that was a very, very powerful experience. I've certainly never forgotten that. And well, I don't know what to think about that. I mean, God only knows what the world is really like, that's for sure. And I've had a variety of very strange experiences that have convinced me that we know very little about anything. So